This video is about using the properties of isosceles triangles to solve for missing values and use the properties of equilateral triangles to solve for missing values. So remember that isosceles triangles are triangles with at least two congruent sides. So in an isosceles triangle, there's a couple of different parts to it. So we have our legs, which are the congruent sides. So we have a leg and a leg. The legs are the two congruent sides. The base then is the non-congruent side. Then we have the vertex angle. The vertex angle is the angle across from the base and between the legs. So up here, this would be our vertex angle. And then we also have two base angles, which are formed by a leg and the base. So we have two base angles because there's two angles that are touching the base. They're also congruent because they are across from the legs. So with the isosceles triangle theorem, if two sides of the triangle are congruent, then the two base angles are congruent. And then the converse, remember converse, we're just flipping the order. So if two angles in the triangle are congruent, then the legs of the triangle are congruent. Remember that the legs are always across from the base angles. So number one, draw an isosceles triangle with a base of 4 and legs of 6. The base angles are 46 and the vertex is 88. So all we're doing here is we're drawing a picture to show we understand where everything is. So I'm going to draw my triangle. I have two legs that are congruent, so both of those legs have a length of 6 and our base has a length of 4. Then we have the vertex angle, which is across from the base, is 88 degrees. And our base angles, which are congruent, are both 46 degrees. Number two, the base angle of an isosceles triangle is 64. What is the vertex angle measure? So if I draw a picture with my triangle, I have my two congruent legs, which also means I have my two congruent base angles. So if it tells me one base angle is 64, they're actually both 64. So then to get our vertex angle, we're just going to subtract from 180. So 180 minus 64 is going to get us 52 degrees. So our vertex angle is 52 degrees. So an equilateral triangle is a triangle with three congruent sides. It also then must be equal angular. So this means all the angles are congruent, and in fact they're all 60 degrees. So if we have three congruent angles, they're 60 degrees in an equilateral triangle. So all the sides are congruent, and all the angles are congruent at a measure of 60 degrees. The sides will change, but the angles will always be 60. So solve for the variables in each problem. So in this case, in number two, because I have two angles that are congruent, across from each angle, the sides are congruent. So if I want to solve for my variable, I want to use the legs. I don't want to use the base. So I'm going to set 3x plus 15 equals 6x plus 3. I'm not going to do anything with this because it's my base side. So when I solve, I get 3x plus 3 equals 15. Subtract 3 from both sides, 12 equals 3x. So x is 4. In number two, if I look at my side measures, I have two measures that are the same, 21 and 21. which means I have congruent legs. So my base angles are congruent. So I can set those equal to each other. 3x plus 24 is equal to 8x minus 41. So I'm going to subtract 3x from both sides. 24 equals 5x minus 41. Add 41 to both sides, and I get 65 equals 5x. So when I divide by 5, I get x is 13. In number 3, we want to find our missing angles. So these circles are another way to show that our sides are congruent, which means this angle and this angle are congruent, so they're both x. Remember in a triangle that the measure of the three angles has to equal 180. So to solve for x, I have x plus 28 equals 180. I can subtract 28 from both sides, and I get 2x equals 152. So when I divide by 2, x is 76. So I have 76 and 76. Now remember, when we form a straight line, it measures to 180 degrees. So 180 minus 76 is going to get us a measure of 104. And now if I move to my other triangle, I again have an isosceles triangle, so my base angles are congruent and they are both going to be y. So to solve for y, 180 equals 104 plus y plus y. I can subtract 104 from both sides, and I get 76 equals 2y. When I divide by 2, I get y is 38 degrees. So I have 38 and 38. Number 4. So in number 4, I have this 65 degrees. So I'm going to start with that triangle first. And I know if I have 65 degrees across from legs that are congruent, the base angles are congruent. So they're both 65 degrees. So now I need to find the third angle in the triangle. And so to find that angle, I'm going to do 180 minus 65 minus 65. And I get 50 degrees. I know that these angles are vertical angles, so they are congruent, which means this is also 50. And if x is across from a congruent leg and 50 is across from a congruent leg, they are base angles, so x equals 50 degrees as well. Number 5, now I have a triangle that's isosceles, and I have my two congruent legs, which means my base angles are congruent. So this missing angle is also 4x plus 15. So to solve for x, I know they're all equal to 180. So 180 equals 5x minus 6 plus 4x plus 15 plus 4x plus 15. So when I combine like terms, 5x, 4x, and 4x gets me 13x. Negative 6, 15, and 15 gets me plus 24. So I'm going to subtract 24 from both sides. So 180 minus 24 gets me 156 equals 13x. And when I divide by 13, I get x is 12. In number 6, I have an equilateral triangle. So if it's equilateral, that means it's also equal angular. So all of my angles are 60 degrees. So to solve for z, I can set that equal to 60, and I can subtract 18 from both sides. I get 5z equals 42. I can divide both sides by 5, and I get 42 over 5, which is also equal to 8.4. Now to solve for x and y, if all of my sides are congruent, then all of the sides are 28. So I have 3x plus 7 equals 28. I can subtract 7 from both sides and divide by 3. So I get x is 7. I can do the same thing with y. 4y minus 16 equals 28. I can add 16 to both sides, so 4y equals 44. When I divide, y is 11. Number 7, solve for x and y. So I know that all of the legs are congruent. So I need to make two equations. So I'm just going to pick any two sides. I'm going to pick 6x plus y equals 10x minus 4. So I see there's an x and a y, so I need to get the x to the same side. So I'm going to subtract 10x from both sides. Negative 4x plus y equals negative 4. I need another equation. So this time I'm going to use 2y plus 8 is equal to 10x minus 4. So I'm going to subtract 10x from both sides and subtract 8 from both sides. And I get 10x plus 2y equals negative 12. Now I can use both of these equations to set up a system. So I have negative 4x plus y equals negative 4. Negative 10x plus 2y equals negative 12. So right now nothing eliminates, so to eliminate the y, I'm going to multiply the first equation by negative 2. So I get 8x minus 2y equals 8. I get negative 10x plus 2y equals negative 12. So when I add straight down, the y's cancel out. I'm left with negative 2x equals negative 4. And when I divide, x is 2. Once I know what x is, I need to pick an original equation to go back and get y. So negative 4 times 2 plus y equals negative 4. So I get negative 8 plus y equals negative 4. And when I add 8 to both sides, y is 4. So my point would be 2, 4. Number 8, ABC is an isosceles triangle with base AB. So I'm going to draw my triangle, and I know that AB is the base. So I'm going to put AB on the bottom. Your base doesn't have to be on the bottom, but I'm going to put it there in this case, which means that the other two sides are congruent because this is my base. Because in an isosceles triangle, we have two congruent legs, which are not the base. So AC is 5x plus 13. BC is 7x minus 1, and AB is 9x minus 7. So I'm going to use the two congruent sides only to solve for x first. So 5x plus 13 is equal to 7x minus 1. So I'm going to subtract 5x from both sides and add 1 to both sides. So 14 equals 2x. When I divide, x is 7. I also need to find the perimeter. So I'm going to substitute 7 into all three sides. So 5 times 7 plus 13 is 48. 7 times 7 minus 1 is 48, which should make sense because my legs are congruent. And 9 times 7 minus 7 is 56. So my perimeter, I have to add up all of the sides, 48 plus 56. And I get a perimeter of 152. Number 9, DEF is an equilateral triangle. So in an equilateral triangle, all three sides are congruent. So the perimeter of the triangle is 12x minus 6. One side of the triangle is 3x plus 16. So it doesn't matter what side, any side. Remember, if they're all equilateral, though, they're all 3x plus 16. So to find my perimeter and then find the length of each side, I need to solve for x first. So I have three sides that are all 3x plus 16. I'm going to set that equal to the perimeter. So I get 9x plus 48 is equal to 12x minus 6. I'm going to subtract 9x from both sides, so 48 equals 3x minus 6. Add 6 to both sides, so 54 equals 3x. So when I divide by 3, I get x is 18. Once I know x is 18, I can substitute in 3 times 18 plus 16, and I get that each side of the triangle has a length of 70.